Hello, here we are. We're going to get going with Esther chapter 7. And if you remember, Haman was extremely upset because he had to lead Mordecai around on a horse with a crest on its head and put a robe on Mordecai and put him up on that horse and lead him around and say, this is the man that the king has desired to honor. So he went home pretty much in tears, and his wife pretty much kicked him while he was down, and in the middle of her saying, you know, this is the end of you, the courtiers came to take Haman to the banquet that Queen Esther had prepared for Haman and the king. So let's pick it up there. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what's your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I found favor with you, your majesty, and if it please you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? And see, that was Haman's mistake. He didn't realize that one of the Jews he sought to annihilate would be Queen Esther, a queen that the king clearly loves. Esther said, an adversary, let's read that again. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who's dared to do such a thing? In other words, kill my queen. Esther said, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Okay, now I want to make a distinction here. This version of the Bible, which doesn't deter from what's written, it's just in plainer English. It's called the New International Version. Okay, it's very plain English. Earlier texts refer to the pole as a gallows. And when the scholars have studied this, it turns out that being hung on a pole does not necessarily mean a gallows and hanging. They also know that in Persia, the primary execution was impalement. So there are many examples in the Bible that these scholars point out where someone is hung on a tree or hung on a, hung from something, like Absalom, hung by his hair in the oak tree. It means suspended. Okay, so this is why this version is not saying he was hung on anything. He was impaled on a pole. I think earlier versions say hung on a pole, so people assume it's a gallows, but most likely it isn't. So this is the first time for me reading a version that has him impaled on a pole. Now, when it was a gallows, we used to say, boy, there's an example of getting, hanging yourself with your own rope, since he had set up that gallows for Mordecai and then got hung on it. But in reality, it's the same concept. He set a trap for Mordecai in the way of this 50-cubit high pole, and that's very tall. If a cubit is 18 inches and it goes up 50 feet, he wanted Mordecai to be displayed all over the whole city of Susa. Okay, and now he's up there, impaled on it, in whatever way they did that, probably a terrible way. And he's being displayed. I believe it's Susa is the city they're in, S-U-S-A, okay? So just so we're clear, for those of you who have been Christians for quite a while and have always heard this as being a gallows, scholars think probably not, okay? More impalement was the primary form of execution in Persia. All right. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. This is a great example of what happens to enemies of the Lord and how the Lord can bring vindication to a person. The very plot that they've set up for you to humiliate and destroy you, they fall into it themselves. They end up getting punished by their own device, okay? This happens over and over again. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it's the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I've given his estate to Esther, and they've impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, S-I-V-A-N, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language, meaning their own writing. Mordecai wrote in the name of the king Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. Do you know how happy he must have been and how he must have praised his God who once again saved the Jews? The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves. Isn't that funny? Because right now we're watching the Jews, people saying they don't have a right to defend themselves, and they do. They have a right to protect themselves. To destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children. See, the more things change, the more they stay exactly the same. Here it is. In ancient Persia, we're going to read that again. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. Seems like this is God's plan for them. And I was thinking too about the time that we saw the Jewish army marching out to fight somebody, and they were singing, our God is full of love, and on and so forth. And I thought, isn't that a weird dichotomy? They're singing of God's love while they're going out to slaughter people. But sometimes God's purposes are accomplished through war. Okay, now I'm not a war nick. Okay, I'm not into war. War is a bad thing. We all know it. But the point I'm making is that at least in these early days, God accomplished a lot through war, and yet he was still revered as a good God because he is. Okay? All right. Just an aside there that I was thinking about. You know, it may seem like a dichotomy, but in reality it's not, because the Jews were in a war protecting their country and singing to the Lord as they marched out to war. That's actually quite beautiful. We should all, we should all go out to war like that if we have to war. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, so the same day, or maybe, yeah, same day that they were supposed to be destroyed. They were given this edict. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So if anybody decided to attack them because of the former edict, they were now going to get, they were going to meet some violence, okay? The Jews were allowed to fight back. Also, I want to, well, I think I just lost it. When I remember it, I'll bring it up again. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa, S-U-S-A. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. This is how the Lord honors people who get pushed around. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I had said to you last night that Mordecai and Esther had stayed in Persia after the Nebuchadnezzar had brought all the Jews into captivity to Babylon. You know, she could have easily been born in Persia. They were there for 70 years. So they may never have lived in Jerusalem, Mordecai or Hadassah, Esther. They may be Persians, Jewish Persians. I don't know. I just thought of that today. I was like, you know, you basically were thinking that they came out of or they went into captivity because they were living in Israel or Jerusalem or Judah, and then they decided to stay in Persia. No, I think they might have been born in Persia and they're just Persian Jews, okay, or Jewish Persians. All right, so just another aside. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor in every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came. There was joy and gladness among the Jews with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Wow. It's kind of almost like fear of the Lord. They saw that these people were special and had some special power, and that power behind their throne is the Lord. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, this is when they're supposed to be destroyed, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them, because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vizatha. Isn't that funny that these names are new because they're Persian names or different nationalities, and my tongue can't figure them out yet, whereas I'm very used to saying the Israelite names. The 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. Okay, so those were the 10 sons. Let's read it again and I'll get my tongue used to this. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, excuse me, Pamashta, Arisai, Aridal, and Valzatha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Who'd want it? You know, I think about that, like enemies in my own family that are older than me. Not that I don't love them or care for them, but when I think about them passing on and perhaps leaving me something, I don't want their stuff. I'm speaking specifically of my mother. I don't want her stuff. I don't want anything from her. Not because I'm offended, but because it just feels like anything she would give me would be very spiritually dirty. And I mean, I can think of a couple things that would be nice to have. And, maybe one thing like her beautiful, she has a heart-shaped garnet ring that's very beautiful. And she used to tease me and say, when I'm dead, so we kind of had a joke about that. But, if I think about anything, I doubt she'll leave me anything. But let's just say she did. I don't want it. I don't want it. It just seems spiritually dirty to me. All right, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder, so they took nothing from Haman. What could they possibly want? I mean, taking stuff from somebody who hates you it's not a blessing. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Oops, I already read that. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted. If it pleases the king, Esther answered, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles. So they're already dead. They're just going to be shown off as dead by being stuck on poles. So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. Now, see, I'm going to say something here. There's something about enemies, okay? We do forgive, okay? And we will ourselves to forgive if we're struggling with it. We don't have the luxury of forgetting. Only the Lord has the luxury of forgetting the stuff that somebody does that is evil. We are to remember it so that we're wise, okay? But if we've forgiven them, we're not going to hold it against them, but we're going to remember what these people are capable of. And it's very rare to see someone, I don't know, in my life, to see anybody really repent and change. Usually they just stay the same, and it's good to keep them at arm's length, okay? Sometimes we have to forgive people without ever getting an apology, and that's fine. Where was I going here? I was thinking about Esther saying, this is what I want. She wanted exact justice. She wanted them impaled on poles, okay? And I'm trying to think what I was going to say about that. Something about that it's okay to want justice. We're just not the ones meting it out, okay? It is okay to want to be vindicated. It is okay to want the Lord to stand for you and avenge you, or to vindicate you. But, Esther had the power to say she wanted them impaled on poles. We keep our mouths shut, okay? We don't mete out the punishment. The Lord does. And I don't sit around saying, ooh, punish them, Lord, punish them, Lord. In angry moments, I do. I say, why won't you punish them, Lord? That's usually my cry. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you that there is a time for justice, and we're going to see that in Ecclesiastes about to everything there's a season. Okay, and if we just stay in prayer and stay focused on the Lord takes care of everything. He most certainly does. And we stay wary of those who have brought great harm to us. We forgive them, but we remember only the Lord has the luxury of forgetting, okay? Because he can take somebody's sins and throw them as far away as the east is from the west, okay? And I might be talking about a few different things here, all under the same banner. So you get me, I hope. All right. Okay, so the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Once again, who wants the stuff that people who hated you had? Yuck. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but didn't lay their hands on the plunder. See, I mean, that's a good representation of how I feel. I mean, the plunder of some people who really hate you is not appealing, okay? Now, when we look at all the armies of Jerusalem that went out to fight their enemies and plundered them, that's different. There's nothing personal there. That's between kings and they're the soldiers, okay? And they're allowed to plunder. But when it's personal and these people wanted to slaughter the Jews and were hunkering down, waiting for that special day under Haman's edict to kill them, that's just disgusting. And that's why these Jews they're taking it personally enough to kill them, but they don't want anything that they had because they're just godless, icky people. All right. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th, well, why does it say on the 14th day they rested? And then it says, okay. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces got relief from their enemies, killed 75,000, didn't lay hands on the plunder. It happened on the 13th, which was the day of the edict. On the 14th, they rested. But the Jews in Susa, they assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th, they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observe the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast the pur, P-U-R, that is the lot, for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had devised against the Jews should come back onto his own head, and that he and his sons should be impaled on poles. Therefore, these days were called Purim, P-U-R-I-M, from the word pure, P-U-R. Because of everything written in this letter, and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them, the Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who joined them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family and in every province and in every city, and these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, words of goodwill and assurance to establish these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed for them, as they had established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. Okay, we're going to stop there. I want you to know that after this book, and I'm not sure that isn't the very end, we're going to go into Job, and that's quite a story. And then we're going to go into Proverbs, Psalms and Proverbs, and that's going to be very beautiful and very interesting. Proverbs is amazing, as well as Psalms, but they're two very different books. So we have another storybook coming with Job, and then we will go into Psalms and Proverbs. I love you very much. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll move on. Good night.